Alyssa Lang, I want to say real quick hello to a couple of people that I met, Chris and Debbie Lagacy and their son Caden at Bucky's yesterday in Auburn. The kid's lips were all swollen, and they said he was a trombone player in the Auburn band. They live in Charleston, South Carolina, and so a lot of people from all over the place loving football, traveling. Let's bring in Alyssa Lang. Alyssa, great having you at the Touchdown Club in Memphis last week. You really know your stuff. You really are. Your parents are Hokies, which I love because a lot of my family are all Hokies. Give them hell. Let's talk about the SEC this past weekend, what you saw from your perspective. And I got to tell you, man, I call it Takedown Saturday.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. And I'll start by saying, Rob, I texted you about this right before I came on. If it gets really loud behind me, my apologies. Today of all days, apparently the city decided that the sidewalk in front of our townhouse needs to go. And so they're out in front of it with whatever the tool is, they are drilling it to pieces. And it's been very loud on and off. So apologies in advance for that. But yeah, I mean, I said it last week on our SEC network shows. When you look at the schedule and the schedule looks boring, that's when you're going to get the most chaos. And that's when everything crazy is going to happen throughout the weekend. And that's exactly what we saw this past weekend with all these games. I mean, I knew that there was a chance that we would see one, maybe two upsets, but I didn't necessarily think that the chaos that we saw, not only in the SEC, but across college football would be as insane as it was. I'll pat myself on the back and say I was worried for Ole Miss. I did think that Ole Miss going down to Gainesville with how Florida had been playing would be a massive trap game. That obviously came to fruition, but I was shocked by what we saw from Alabama. I really, really was. I've seen Oklahoma a couple of times up close and in person. It's going to be a very interesting conversation now as far as 3-loss SEC teams go and the college football playoff. Maybe there's teams in the Southeastern Conference that end up sneaking into the CFP that weren't really in the discussion when we entered this past weekend. So this final weekend of the season is going to be, I think, even more insane. Texas A&M still controls their own destiny. We spent the last week talking about, well, would you want to make the SEC championship game? Well, is it a good thing? And I look at Georgia, who, heaven forbid, they lose to Georgia Tech this weekend. Say that something crazy like that happened. Georgia Tech's already beaten some good teams this year. Yeah. Don't you love having the opportunity to punch your ticket via the SEC championship game? And now for Texas A&M, obviously just losing to Auburn, you beat Texas and you're in the SEC championship game and you win that and you're in the CFP. So all of a sudden it looks a little bit different to have the opportunity to go to Atlanta.
And you know what, Alyssa, the games, we were in Auburn for that game against A&M, and the A&M people – yeah, they know they're still alive. So are you going to be on that? Is that going to be one of your assignment this weekend? Are you going to be in College Station?
I wish. That would be a ton of fun. I will be in Columbia, Missouri for Arkansas, Missouri this weekend. So fun rivalry game there with two teams that are kind of in different situations, obviously, as far as postseason teams go, but you know, can Sam Pittman in Arkansas end the season with a bang? You know, is postseason, I believe they're at 5 wins, correct me if I'm wrong, is postseason eligibility something that's in their future? Obviously for Missouri, I had them this past weekend at Mississippi State. We were all really curious to see how Missouri would show up after kind of being out of the playoff picture with that loss to South Carolina. And again, it's even hard to say that you're out of the playoff picture at this point when you're still in the top 25 because of everything that could happen around you. So really, you never know what could end up happening.
I think they're still very much alive. I mean, they're not in, but they're very much alive. And then, you know, leave the SEC for a second and you go to the Big 12. Brilliant. And I would argue that perhaps, I mean, Arizona State, but after Arizona State, Kansas might be the second best team in the Big 12. I mean, they're knocking off everybody. And it's just an insane year. And this was – Alyssa's right. This was an absolutely insane weekend of college football.
Well, Alyssa, Arkansas's got 6, so Arkansas's there. They're going to try to get 7.
They're there already. That's right. So, Louisiana Tech this weekend was their bowl eligible win.
I think that will be a cool game to go to because of all the storylines and everything like that. But that is. I mean, Arkansas wants that to be a rivalry too. They want it to, and I think Missouri does more than they do. Missouri's the one. So I think you're going to have a fun assignment. You know what? Just put me at an SEC game. I'm like, I don't care.
Exactly. The one bone that I have to pick about this upcoming assignment, and I usually do this probably midweek. I don't know why I did a little bit earlier this week. I usually will pull up the weather app and I will take a look at what the hourly forecast looks like for my game. How do I need to pack? How much do I need to layer? And I saw that the low in Como on Saturday is like 19 degrees. And I'm sitting here going, hold on a second. I wasn't prepared for this.
Yeah.
It got cold in Starkville on Saturday night too.
Yeah.
So I literally last night spent an hour. All right, I guess I got to dig out my winter coat from the attic and get it ready.
It's cold.
It's gonna be cold.
Brendan,
Cold
jump
in
in
Florida.
I know you had a question. Yeah.
As a kid, I lived in Kansas City for 7 years, and when the heat gets turned off in that part of the country, I mean, it gets turned off. It gets so cold and so dry and so windy. I mean, 19 might mean, minus 16 wind chill because that's just what happens there.
The coldest game I ever did was about a negative 20 wind chill, and it was in Montana, Bozeman, Montana, for an FCS playoff game. And I thought I was really smart. Like, I was proud of myself for this, and it worked. I went and got those back heating patches for muscle relief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I put them on my legs, front and back. I put them on my stomach. I put them on my back. And then I layered up. And when I tell you those worked to stay warm, it was amazing. It really was.
Listen, I used to work in sports TV broadcasting for years, and I did some of those early X Games, or actually the first X Games in Colorado. And I'm a Colorado guy, so I know cold weather and sitting on scaffoldings in the middle of 5 a.m. calls with snowcats barreling up on top of you. It is not fun. That's when you earn your paycheck. That's for sure. I didn't know. It's asked these guys. I was watching SEC Network this morning, as I do every morning, and I was. It was a nice interview with Billy Napier that they had on with Doring. What's your take on, because I had not heard Lane Kiffin's comments until I watched the SEC Network this morning and his post-game presser. What was your take on what he had to say just about college football playoffs and just the whole demeanor there?
So I saw some of his comments on the Saturday night show. You'll have to tell me specifically what you saw this morning.
Well, it's just on the SEC. Yeah, it was just on SEC Network. It was just post-game comments, just complaining about, the college football playoffs and the situation, and they're out of it. And he was sort of grousing about all of that. And I was wondering, because it was featured as a clip on, I think, Doring's show after the morning show and with Billy Napier at 8:30. And I just didn't know, what the sort of the take was. I'm friends with Chris Doring, so I always like to hear his take on it. I just know if you guys had mentioned that at all.
Yeah, so I haven't talked to CD since Saturday. Obviously, like you said, he's doing his show this morning, and I dive into game prep on Monday morning, so I haven't got to see or hear anything that they have said this morning or any of the sound that they ran back. But it is just such an interesting conversation, right? After Ole Miss lost to LSU, that press conference with Jackson Dart where he's got his head down and the towel over his head. He says, well, we have to win out. We have to win out because that's, you just don't know with the committee and what everything could look like around you. As great of a weekend as it was for Tennessee, you kind of hated to be Tennessee going into this weekend before all the chaos happened because, for the most part, you've taken care of business outside of that win against Arkansas, but you just don't know because maybe it's not enough. And the losses, maybe you're just not enough. For Ole Miss, having lost to Kentucky early in the season, knowing what kind of blemish that looks like. If they don't lose to Kentucky, we're not sitting here having this conversation. That's a home game that they should have won against one of the worst teams, or what ended up being one of the worst teams in the SEC. So, I'm not sure that I am ready to sign, seal, deliver Ole Miss out of this thing yet. I just think that it would be a little premature, again, given the chaos that could still happen this weekend, given what could happen in championship games. Because I sit here and I go, I heaven forbid any of this happen, but you could find conference championship games coming up in 2 weeks where a team gets absolutely blown out or a team loses a key position in a key place. And all of a sudden that's a different team. And the committee goes, well, we're not going to put this team that maybe just lost their starting quarterback for the postseason in the college football playoff, just like we saw for Florida State last year. So
correct.
I don't think that it is. I wouldn't tell Ole Miss fans, get your hopes all the way up and you're going to the playoff and don't worry about it. But I also wouldn't tell them that they're fully out of it yet. And they could certainly put up some style points this weekend against Mississippi State in their last conference opponent.
Alyssa, of all the games coming up this weekend, which one is flying under the radar you think might be one of the bigger games? I mean, obviously for Arkansas and Sam Pittman, he's going to have hip surgery, I think, in the next week. And then you got December signing period coming up. But what's kind of catching your eye?
So I may be a little biased saying this, but I am really excited about South Carolina Clemson this weekend.
Yeah.
I think South Carolina is one of those teams that, I think back to that LSU game, and as a Gamecock alum, I sit here and I go, man, that LSU game hurts. 2 pick sixes called back, some questionable calls in the second half of that football game. You lose Lenora Sellers and your entire offense changes. It's sort of similar to Ole Miss, and I know it's woulda, coulda, shoulda, but if you end up beating LSU, this is a playoff team. This is a playoff team in Columbia, South Carolina that's playing like a playoff team right now. They go on the road to Clemson. I had that game last year. It was an ugly, ugly, low-scoring game in Columbia, South Carolina. It could end up being another one of those situations where, again, if there's chaos, which there probably will be, say South Carolina goes to Clemson and dominates the Tigers, it feels like there could be a real conversation for them to maybe be on a better bubble watch than they are now. And same is true for Clemson. Clemson is a team that we had high expectations for at the beginning of the season. I wasn't necessarily high on them, but you always have high expectations for Clemson. You beat a South Carolina team and a South Carolina defense that's coming into your house, and all of a sudden Clemson probably gets a lot more respect from the committee. So I think that's a rivalry game that always flies under the radar, quite honestly, having experienced it myself as a fan and as a journalist. So that is one. And I think Florida State all of a sudden just got a lot more interesting. I will say personally, I predicted that Florida would win 7 games this year. I got laughed at. I got drug across social media, and all of a sudden they're 1 game away from 7 wins. And if they can beat Florida State in a year where they really should, all of a sudden this looks really good for Billy Napier. 7 wins in a schedule like that. So I'm very interested in how that one goes too.
I think people need to not underestimate the grudge match of Florida State and how difficult it is for the Gators to go in to Tallahassee and win that game, because I've been to many of those games, and look, I've worn orange and blue on the sideline and they threw batteries at me. So like that place is a tough place. I'm joking around because I'm a Gator fan, and I'm still wearing my shirt. The Gators won it Saturday. I still have the shirt on. I'm not taking it off. I'm going to keep it on until they lose. So I got it. So all week I'm going to hold it out for you so I can get 7 wins. So you can be right, Alyssa. But
let's go.
Yeah. So but I think people need to understand that it's never an easy win to go in there, and no matter what the record is. But Florida's got one coming, especially with them coming into the Swamp last year and pulling one over on the Gators.
Yeah. Florida State will always get up for that game, no matter what they've looked like this year. They will get up for that game.
And Dave, I think you had another question.
Yeah. Whoever wins the South Carolina Clemson game, that's a quality win. And one thing I really like about this selection committee for March Madness is they place a lot of merit on quality wins. And quality wins seem to trump bad losses most years when they're on who's in the bubble, last 4 in, first 4 out, the seeding, et cetera. And I think quality wins needs to have more merit in football as well, as we go forward with the playoffs, because I think what's so cool about March Madness, and it's going to be interesting to see if this happens in football, is obviously there's the Cinderella factor. That's a big part of the story arc every year. There's the epic matches, and then the best team almost always wins. After they play 6 games in the tournament. I don't know if that's going to happen this year because of injuries, because of how the seeding is going to be, et cetera, and having to win 4 games. We'll see. But I just really, if we're going to have a tournament in football, and in the first half of the show we make some arguments against having a tournament, it needs to have the same sort of story elements of March Madness. And I know that's not going to happen in the first year, but that's where it has to go if we're going to have a tournament.
Didn't Mike Leach say years ago, just get rid of the regular season and put 64 teams out there, play bracket style from start to finish? Like, maybe Mike Leach was right. He was right about a lot of other things. Maybe he was right.
You remember you talked to him, man, that interview you did on the field with him. Man, look, I know you're on a tight schedule, and we got to get you back on. You really know your stuff. I love Out of Pocket.
Thank
Randall
you.
Cobb's from Oak Ridge, Alcoa. Tennessee fans never got over him going to Kentucky. He is y'all are really good. You got great chemistry. We had Roman Harper on the show Friday. I love read and react, but keep doing what you're doing, man. I love what you do, and you're just going to keep rising because you bring a lot of enthusiasm, but you're always happy. We only bring happy, upbeat people on this show, and I didn't
Happy
hear any
jazz hands
jackhammer in the
people.
background.
That's what we do.
Yeah, with the jackhammers outside. How could you not be happy when you're living in SEC country every day?
I've been in the swamp all
happy.
weekend. I can't hear anything anyway.
I've got a granddaughter in the next room, but she ate, so she's okay. But we're in Atlanta all week. But Alyssa, how do people follow you on social media, keep up with you, and talk about your show, and we'll let you go?
Yeah, if you're still on Twitter, I'm on Twitter at Alyssa Lang, Alyssa
Absolutely.
G. Lang on Instagram. So those are the two that I use the most. Occasionally TikTok, but not really.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look, man, have a great week. Have fun out there in Missouri for the game. Dress warm. We'll be watching. You're a credit to the profession, man. I love it.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Hope we can do this again soon, and have a happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Same to you. Happy Thanksgiving.
We'll get the 7 wins for you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, there you go.